Ciao amici, come state oggi? How are all of you? Yes, I'm a Genoese Cuban. My mother is Polish and Anglo-Saxon, but my father is half Genoese, half Cuban. Genoese Cuban in the sense that, as you'll see, we're going to go through all these in real time so that you know that they're not edited or anything. I mean, they're edited, but the information in them isn't false. Those are my results. Then I'm Genoese and everything. My last name is Pitaluga with one T. It's an Italian Ligurian name from Genoa, meaning pick the grape, and there are a couple variants. Genoese colonies, as you can see here, Genoa expanded all throughout the Mediterranean, including Spain and Spanish colonies. These are my father's results. We'll be primarily focusing on my father's. As you can see here, the Portuguese represents my Genoese grandfather, and again, I have a Genoese surname, and it's to represent that he's white. They're doing me a favor because it's, as you can see here, it's like a mishmash of like northern Spanish, like Basque Catalan, Genoese, Roman English, German, right? And like here on the highlights, right? And in other videos, I've said that my ancestry results are censored. I still think they are. I still think they can do better filters, and I think that they will in the future. So anyway, on to what you were looking for. These are my father's ancestry DNA results. Now it does show him as having Genoese, northwestern Italy. Um, right here, 2%, and Sardinian 2%, so he's got 4% Italian. Okay, so that's more than my heritage, right? But there's no clear-cut European percentage. I get you can't have everything, so okay, that's fine, right? My Cuban grandmother has some French in her, so that's probably where the 2% French comes in at some point. Um, right, and some of the English and stuff like that, and Ashkenazi, Jews here. I guess that, Genoese expansion into Europe includes like merchants, and some of those merchants were Jews and things like that, you know. But if you count French Canadian as white, then my dad's 90% European. If you don't, then he's 86% European, which is about the same as like, Sicilians and things like that. And my dad is 100% Cuban. And then the journeys, right? Just whoops, right? Just Cuban and Canary Islands, and then I hope in the future it'll include maybe because the Southern Italian was more recent, as you can see here, like the right, the Sicilian things like that, could be more recent. So if they give me a migration with Canary Islands and Sicily, because that has a link, in general anyway. I could see that being a migration group in the future. Now, again, the picture in the video was an AI image, but it's based on the heat map for me. Now, my mother's Polish and Anglo-Saxon, so that does interfere. But I just wanted to show you that in the heat map 3000 BC at the beginning of it, for me, despite, my dad having a mother with a Spanish Castilian surname, that I have a Genoese surname, so that between Spain and Italy, that it's Italian in the beginning. Okay, so now that I showed you guys that Italian shines through, and it does that more frequently in other places too, though some Spanish shows up inevitably because I am like, roughly a quarter-ish, Spanish. I also wanted to show you, I've shown this in other videos, here's a picture of my Genoese grandfather. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was a short Italian guy, my Cuban grandma. Right, here's a picture of my father, my mother, when I was young. Right, here's a picture of what, I look like now. Right, so here's the beginning of time for my father, right, the Italian Alps, right, and some French and German, right, the German probably with the Italian and the Italian Alps, and some of this, what is it, Bulgaria, right? The Poland, that actually could be because on Ancestry DNA it put the Ashkenazi Jew with my Cuban grandmother when it split my dad in half, but I don't know how credible that is because, for example, my blonde haired, blue eyed, clearly like just pure European mother, it lists as having like part of the African American from the Cuban African in me on Ancestry DNA when it split me in half before it had my father. So I don't know how credible they are, and I know that's not true because my Anglo-Saxon grandmother was as white as they come and as American as they come. With everything, there's definitely no hidden, like, not to disrespect anybody, but it just is what it is. I don't know how right. It says that's a beta. I remember when it first came out, it said it was a beta, so I don't know how credible that is. So I don't trust that thing fully, but I mean, that could explain if that is correct that the Ashkenazi Jew here on my father could be from the Spanish. Okay, so then let's move forward to about 2500 or so. Right there, 2510. That's around the time of the first Ligurians, right? Right on the Ligurian Sea, as you can see here, right close to Genoa. And it never quite lands on Genoa in any of these maps, but that's okay. Like, I'm sure plenty of people have last names that don't match exactly with these heat maps, just areas around it, right? But that's how you know, right? The first Punic War, right? As you can see here, lots of Southern Italian, right? The first Punic War was about 280 or so. So as you can see here, Spain, which was controlled by Hannibal, is of course my Cuban grandmother, because this is my dad's DNA. So of course, the and most Northern Italian Celts fought against Rome, but Rome, it includes Rome here. Now Genoa specifically fought on the side of Rome. Uh, you know, uh, but the mixture of everything else indicates because it was really, like the, Roman Britain and areas of Gaul and things. Well, maybe the areas. It's probably a mishmash, And then the Second Punic War around here again, like a mishmash, like split, you know. So then the end of Rome, 500 BC, I mean AD. You can see Roman and Genoese, right? Northwestern Italy, highlighted, right? And some like Levantine. Uh, And then, as you can see here in the 1200s, right, Southern Italian, and then at the time of like 1492 or whatever, you can see shortly after 1492, there's like Northwestern Italy, like Alpine French border DNA matches, but in the actual 1400s, 92, I mean, it's like, shortly, hold on, it's hard to get the exact point. Yeah, yeah, and I knew what the answer was. It's like Roman and Sardinian, right? But here's the thing, if you look at, Sardinia, that point in Sardinia, that was a heavily Genoese occupied, right? So Christopher Columbus, he himself could have been born in Genoa, but my specific ancestors could have been from Sardinia, right? With Roman ancestry, right? On my Pitaluga side, right, and of course on the Cuban grandmother side, South, Spanish, Southern Spanish. Um, so that I think sums it all up. Uh, we could go through and the again as a 100% Cuban, the closest match my dad has is for Roman Hispania, Visigoths, Gallo-Celtic Sequani, which is a Germanic group, Aquitani, which is Basque, and then Illyrians, which is Southern Italian. So that's the groupings, and then for me, and I'm missing Genoese on a lot of these points, because it takes away, because the Genoese is further diluted. Uh, right. All right. So this is That's a random time. So let's go. We saw the beginning of time. So around the first Ligurian's 24. It actually shows Catalan, but Catalan has a Ligurian link, so it shows up as Spanish here, even though it was Italian at the beginning. Uh, let's see here. The First Punic War. It's showing more French, southern French areas, and only slight with the actual Spanish, and then Italian Alpine, and then is that it's near Rome. That's probably it's Etruscan probably territory, but judging by the Balkan and other things too, it's a mixture of the Roman forces from my Pitaluga line. And then let's see here, 500 AD. Right, so I guess around 500 AD, my Cuban grandmother has some Portuguese ancestry, with like most Cubans, but I have Northwestern Italy is a deep dive match, like as well as like other areas for like Polish and Czech Balkan type ancestry before they were in Poland from my mother's side. And then let's see here. Norman Sicily. I like the Norman Sicily match especially because I have southern Italy and Sicily, right, and the Slovakian and Hungarian, and then the Anglo-Saxon and the French here, for my results. And then for the 1492 period, it does show up like my specific ancestry is like Northwestern Italian Alpine and Roman, and it doesn't even show Spanish, right? And I'm supposedly like, or people would assume that when they assume Hispanic, like, all my ancestors come from Spain, or I have the last name that originates from Spain, whereas like around the time of the explorers of the Americas, uh, these were my ancestors. Now, again, like I have an Anglo-Saxon grandmother, so that accounts for some of the, Irish and English and Scottish ancestors that were on the map that you saw. So I guess at the particular time of like, this is before 1776, 1530, I don't remember what happens after this, but at around the time of the early American explorers, like, my ancestors were, Swedish and Danish, and then some Latvian from the Polish and some Hungarian and things like that, but I am Genoese. I'm a Pitaluga. So let's move forward here. 1530, right before the revolution. Okay, so I mean France, was siding with the American colonies. So then my ancestry is like mostly French here, right? And Swedish, right, and some German, right, and some French-German border peoples, right, in southern England. And this is after the Revolutionary War. Just it's just interesting how it's neither Italy nor Spain shows up. 1800, and then it's as far as it goes. All right, folks. I hope you've enjoyed the video as me as a American of Genoese Cuban background. Thank you so much. Have a great day.